really the way I approach anything is I learn all my lines, and then I do my whole backstory, deconstruct it, so that way I can just listen. And then because I think and I'm sure there's a lot of actors here, we don't realize how much our subconscious is working, and sometimes it's working overtime. So when you get to the place where I can just look at John and I could just listen to him and just focus on listening to him, that all kind of just follows suit.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Congratulations on the show. I love it. It's so immersive, and there's so many ideas going on all throughout it. And I love the setting of it. I love the spooky nature of it, and I love the truths that it says about this country and about what's going on in it then as now. Aram, John, let's talk about the beginnings of it, the origin of the idea. What was the start of it for you, Aram?
So for me, John and I did Latin history for Morons together, 2018,
something like that. Yeah,
but. I had never immersed myself in Latin history in the way that John did. It just felt like, I was always really interested in this like oppression in the 50s, because it felt like everyone, like coming out of World War II, everyone was feeling really empowered. They had won, women were empowered, women were working, the men were gone, they could do whatever they wanted. And then coming out of Latin history for Morons, it felt like there was this sector of sort of like, Latin or indigenous people that were voting against their interests or self-hating or self-loathing. And that was something that I didn't really realize. So in writing this, I wrote the first episode. I didn't want to go to John and, try to get him involved unless I could give him something to read, because it's tonally really unique and sort of interesting. I think you have to like read it to be able to understand it. So at that point, I brought him in and said, would you be open to taking a risk on this and essentially playing a role that historically would be written for like a white, middle class suburbanite, and trying to flip that on its head. And luckily we had trust there, and we could do it.
And it was great because I always see so much stuff in the 50s and 40s, and like Latin people are totally absent and missing and erased, but we've been here. The first European language spoken in America was Spanish, not English. And we've been here since, 1492 and before. So.
And you specifically are very loud. So you've been here.
I have to be loud to be heard because of all the deafening absence. Right. So I was really happy to see like him including Latin people in it, and in a new intersection that's happening for Latin people, understanding that we're indigenous and not denying it, because we've been in such denial of it, and my family has been, and Latin people in general, running away from it, afraid of it, scared of it, and their Afro-Latinidad as well, both of those. So this was such a great way to study all these things, and also this horrible thing that the fact that he dug this up, that we all saw Killers of the Flower Moon, and we saw the horrors of that, but this was also going on in the 50s. Like, this is a real thing where the FBI got involved in taking children from Native American families
up into the 80s.
Into the 80s, it went into the 80s, so they couldn't inherit the land, so they could give it to the oil companies.
Well, and to whitewash. Just assimilate.
So I just love what he was writing, man. It was so powerful. It was so of our times. It spoke on the complexity is so incredible. And that's what I love. I love a character. I love a story that's deep, real, and powerful like that. So yeah, I jumped in right away.
Yeah. Let's talk performance-wise, character-wise, because certainly that is one of the...
Well, he needed a lot of help. Is that what you're going to say?
I always need a lot of help.
On set.
And I get it.
In the edit, he was heavily prescribed medication. But
Well, one of the things I love about Gordo Rogers he's a man without a country, but it's also in so many ways he's seeking a country. He's trying to find this adopted identity in a country that doesn't want him, and he is very much trying to run from a country that he's really not even sort of he wants to be part of. There's so many layers to that. What was kind of a key for you for the characterization?
When you look at immigration footage on Fox News or whatever, you see who is arresting all these immigrants and rounding them up. It's Latin people. It's Latin guys, Latin women who are Border Patrol. And to me, I don't know, there's an aspect of self-hate, of self-denial, of how do you perpetrate that on these mothers and children, because it's mostly women and children. Yeah. So you see it right there, you know, that's so emblematic, and you know, that was my entry into Gordo, the sort of wanting to be so part of the system, and be accepted as, you know, as white as you can be in white passing, and even though he can't really pass. I mean, he doesn't pass for me. Right. Yeah. I mean, I thought I was white passing, but I'm also in denial.
Right. Well, there's that moment that's so powerful when he says, you know, we speak English here. There's sort of that sense of like deflecting it onto others, and like so he can remain invisible in a way, or assimilate. Yeah,
beautifully said.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible, but but beautifully said.
Yeah, yeah. Marco, congratulations on this performance as well. This is just like John. It is so magnetic. Yes.
Oh my God, they didn't clap for you. They're clapping for Marco, but they didn't clap for you.
I've been in this business 40 years. I got claps.
Oh, I've been in the business for
They know. I'm not fishing for compliments, but applause.
Fishing.
But I got it. What?
No, this is Marco's moment.
Yeah, right.
Let him have it.
Yeah, you let him have it.
Well, Marco, one of the things I think is so interesting about Joe is that he's playing a role as well, and he's bridging these different worlds, these different sort of senses of authority and also sort of subversion. And he's, you know, I love that moment when he was a devotee of Uta Hagen's acting style. It was like that he'd go that deep. What were some keys to him for you? How did you kind of see the core of him in some ways?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, what was the core of Joe for you? Kind of, because he is sort of a guy playing several roles, just like in some ways Gordo is.
He's a guy playing a guy.
Yeah, right. Right.
But I think the thing that I was most excited about was Aram kind of just letting me run with it, and I love creating like my own backstories and making subtle choices, and you know, kind of creating my own story behind the character.
Subtle choices.
You don't think? I haven't seen the rest of the series. Maybe they're not so subtle. But yeah, he's a very secretive, very flawed man who has a lot of secrets of his own.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to give too much away.
Right.
So I'm trying to tread lightly there. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just very grateful that I, you know, met someone who was able to create this entire world and let me play in it.
Yeah, working with Aram has been incredible, man. I mean, first of all, he wrote this sick, twisted story that's so powerful and necessary in our times. But he's also incredibly collaborative. Yeah. You know, and it's a blast to work with him because he's very, you know, aware of subtlety and of real acting and real behavior. Yeah. And also trusts his actors. I mean, those are great qualities that made me feel safe working with him, because I need to feel safe to do my best work. I really do. And I think you need a safe space to try, to experiment, to fail, because nobody's perfect. And you come in there and you want to be able to fail. And that's when you can really do your best work, I believe.
Yeah. And you and I talked about this. We wouldn't have been able to do this if we hadn't worked together.
No.
For 10 years on other things.
I don't know if I would have accepted the role because it's too complicated and too difficult, and I wanted to be able to give this guy. I didn't want people to like him. He's not a likable human being. He's a despicable guy in so many ways, but I wanted to be understood. Yeah. And that's what we worked really hard, was we want to understand him and his whys.
Yeah, yeah. And something that Marco said, which is that throughout this entire first season, there are sort of secrets upon secrets and layers upon layers that I really, I can't recommend more, because it's really so fascinating. Aram, let's kind of talk a little bit about the layering of that, sort of that sense of, there's aspects of everything from the sort of the Native American head on the television signals that used to go off after the television after 1 a.m. or whatever, and the cultural kind of layering, all this tapestry that's going on. How was it kind of weaving all of that through and kind of keeping a balance between kind of what was American mythology and what's American fact? Well,
so we had a few different Native advisors on this. Melissa Tantaquidgeon was one, who was the medicine woman for the Mohegan tribe, who was specifically in this area. And then Irene Bedard, who plays Glennie, was executive produced it and was involved very early on. It became very convenient to use the 50s because, I mean, it's everywhere. Like fact fiction, like, I mean, there's oppression everywhere. I mean, everyone's oppressed in the 50s. Yeah. Even white men were oppressed. They wish they could have been somewhere else, or they wish they didn't have to have 3 kids and do what they, you know. So I mean, that was there. I think the thoughtful piece was this, like, how can we be an ally and also tell a fictional story? And I think that's the bit that took a lot of conversation. But I think what I found, especially working with Melissa, is that Native Americans don't often have opportunities to play fictional characters. Yeah. They're offered a lot of like fact-based characters because they believe, you know, and this is something that John and I talked about. You know, John, early on in your career, you were not offered a lawyer just because you could play a great lawyer. You were offered.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I started back in the early 1980s, in the 80s, I mean, the casting breakdown, which was what was given out, I think it was Fridays. Well, I can't remember if it was Mondays or Fridays.
Oh, yeah, you can't remember. He's losing his.
Yeah. I can't recall.
He's very old.
Like Jeff Sessions, I can't recall. I know it's a throwback.
I'm in the middle of answering a question right now.
No, I'm going to go back.
This is a total aside. There's nothing.
But it was like a Jim Crow thing. I mean, I'm sorry, but it was like Jim Crow. It was like, you know, white lead, white doctor, white lawyer, white romantic lead, Latin drug dealer. Yeah. And I would have like, you know, I was going to NYU and I was going to school with Andrew McCarthy and D.B. Sweeney. And they were going to 5 auditions a day and I was going to one every 5 months for a drug dealer or murderer. And it was like, I realized my opportunities were never going to be like theirs. And so, yeah, the opportunities to do a role like this complex, to be a lead, is wild. I mean, Aaron and I were talking about that. I mean, I don't want to jinx anything or whatever, but if we're nominated for this, it will be the first time that a Latin lead is nominated for a series, a dramatic series, which is. In 75-year history, that's crazy.
Right. Wow. And by the way, let's also, I have to acknowledge the amazing ensemble around these two guys. You mentioned Irene, but I want to, let's have a round of applause for all of them. For Hani Furstenberg, Irene Bernard, Isabel Poloner, John Ortiz.
John Ortiz, I'm here from American Fiction.
Yes, he's fantastic. They're all fantastic. And let's maybe talk about how the collaboration with you and Hani kind of worked out, because it's a very interesting, it's tense, but it's also, it's kind of floating above the domesticity in a lot of ways. How did you guys kind of find a nice ground to kind of base the reality of that relationship on?
We spent, you know, like, I'm very method about it, so we spent as much time together as we could, and Aaron wrote some really great scenes with a lot of incredible dialogue, and we wanted to create that we had some kind of attraction to each other. There was some strange reciprocal love that was sick and twisted that she needed, that I needed. I supplied some of her needs, she supplied some of my needs, and so we wanted to create this relationship that functioned, even though it was dysfunctional. I mean, because who doesn't come from dysfunction? I mean, we're all fucked up, and let's face it. If you can't face it, then you're even more fucked up.
Right.
No, but I think that when we when we gave the script to people to read early on, men would often be like, this is entirely unbelievable that a woman would stay in a relationship like this. And women would read it and say, I've been in situations like this. And it was so telling to be able to give these drafts to people. And you know, so if men would give me that note, it's like, well,
so you were giving the script out to other people before you gave it to me?
No,
it's okay.
You would give me notes. You would give me notes, and I'd say these are batshit notes. I better gut check these people I actually trust.
No, it's okay. We'll talk about it later. No, go ahead, please.
Get through the week. Go do something else. We're done. I told you I'll never work with you again. This is it.
All right, bye.
No, but it was. You know, do we enable some like? Does this relationship work and stand on, you know, with some stuff unsaid? And I think putting the two of them in a room together, we all understood that, like, you know, tension was high for multiple reasons. Like, there was a lot left unsaid, and they had to carry that in a subtle way. And the way that we shot with like 20, 25 pages, we would shoot all the dinner scenes at once for all 8 episodes. And so
it was a lot.
I mean, they would sit at the table and we'd do episode 1, episode 3, episode 6, episode 8, and you know, things would escalate as they do in shows. Or movies.
And to give me even more credit, because this was done on such a shoestring budget, and to do period on a shoestring budget is so difficult.
And during COVID.
So we had COVID tests and all that. It was pretty incredible.
Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. I'm going to come to that idea in a second, because that's also fascinating too, because the way this series looks is really beautiful. Yeah. But I'm going to ask Aram about the notion of identity, because Hani's character, very much as we see in these episodes, she's now choosing to take on an identity that maybe also she felt I think that the character feels as if whatever background she sort of had is not serving her, and then it will dovetail that over to Marco because of the way that Joe kind of works the identity into it. But in terms of identity and how that works into the series with characters like Hani's, that's also very interesting because it's affecting everybody, right? That sort of sense, it's
100%.
pervasive.
The theme.
100%. Yeah, identity is the theme overall. I mean, I think when I was writing this and I found out about the WASPs, which are like the female group of pilots in World War II, and they weren't allowed to go fight in the war, but they would ferry planes back and forth across the U.S. and they weren't recognized until like the late 70s. I don't think as like actually military, but there were a group of women that were like really empowered to live their own lives, do what they want. I mean, these were like fighter pilots,
right.
And then their husbands came home and they were like domesticated again, and that was just so fascinating that they like all fell in line. And I just thought like, you read stories about it and they're like happy to raise a family and happy, but you think like these women were fighter pilots 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And now they're just their husbands running things and they're being, sent to the doctor for hysteria pills. Like it just didn't track. And so that to me was sort of the undertone of like what anchored the show.
Yeah.
Like everything would come back around to that identity. And John's character had identity issues. Marcus' character naturally had super fucked up identity issues.
Isabel Polner had identity issues.
Yeah, the daughter had identity. She
Yeah.
didn't know who she was. And I think so that, Hani's character anchored that for me in the development of it. And then everything sort of, if that worked and, everyone else could
And the
sort of
themes
spawn
are
off of
beautiful. I mean, the themes of oppression, the women are oppressed, indigenous people are oppressed, the Latin guys oppressed. I mean, there's so much oppression,
Right.
and also people like you were saying brilliantly, Joe. The everybody's hiding an identity and has a second identity.
Yeah. And then identity kind of gets caught in this combine after they come back from World War II, or as they kind of are grasping for some sort of, higher rung on the ladder. It's like they kind of get caught up in the machinery of it, of being put in a spot. And Marco, that obviously is Joe also. And it's tricky because we can't say too much about your character, Marco, because throughout the whole series, I don't want to give anything away, as you said. But that notion of where your loyalty lies, where Joe's loyalty lies in different places, is a tricky one to play, isn't it? I would imagine. Like you want to make sure the camera catches it, but you don't want to give too much away.
Correct.
Yeah. And that's all they can say, right?
This is me not giving it away.
Yeah, right. Did you kind of bank some of that as an actor, kind of have like, metaphorically speaking, sort of something in your side pocket to be able to kind of pull out at certain moments when the character needed something like that emotionally?
I don't think I was really thinking about it in that space. Really, the way I approach anything is I learn all my lines, and then I do my whole backstory, the deconstruct it, so that way I can just listen.
Yeah.
And then because I think and I'm sure there's a lot of actors here. We don't realize how much our subconscious is working, and sometimes it's working overtime. So when you get to the place where I can just look at John and he could I could just listen to him and just focus on listening to him, that all kind of just follows suit.
Yeah.
I would say. Which, by the way, was an incredible experience. Because, I was like, oh my God, Tu Wong Fu. I was like,
I mean, everybody that Aram cast was such a great actor. It made everything so much easier to do. To work with actors who are really present, really listening, and coming at it, having done some homework. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was the first time for me. I've done a lot of projects, and I think that it's so easy to quickly cast smaller roles and think they don't have to be great. But this was the first one where I realized, challenged casting. Like, we really need the right people so that we don't cut. I'm sure many people have been in movies or shows where you're like, that's not how I remember the scene, or this was cut out or whatever. Like, a lot of the time, it's not because it's a bad actor. It's just, it was the wrong choice or the wrong action. And I think by anchoring this with John and being able to really have these moments, or find Marco who is listening really well. Like, in the later episodes, a lot of the cameos, all they do is listen really, really well. And it was just all I had to do is sort of sit back and be like, I wrote these words and you've sort of like created this thing, or the way you picked up the coffee cup was like, I didn't even like, just go do it again. Like, let me see while we watch it. It was just these beautiful moments. Yeah. So I think I was really proud of the casting process, because for the first time I could sit back and be like,
and who
really
was your,
you
got to give props to your casting.
The cast, Avi Kaufman was incredible.
Brilliant.
She just,
Avi.
Yeah. And then we had great Heidi in Upstate.
Oh,
you know,
she cast Upstate.
She cast a lot of the day.
We shot it in the Hudson.
Yeah.
Upstate.
Yeah.
The
Hudson in the house.
Well, because obviously there's also a lot of actors here that would appreciate sort of the notion of, because every episode is from a point of view of a different character, and yet there's still this sort of, you know, all these other characters are orbiting them in this terrific way, and you see different aspects of them. From a writing process, Aram, is that it must be interesting to delineate, because this is like, okay, so this is this character story, this is that one, but also you're also seeing more of the other characters coming in through other different points of view, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I had always thought, we talk about this a lot. Like, I'd always thought like voiceover is like a naughty word, you know, and it's like, oh, if you write something, you know, it's going to be shitty if you need voiceover to explain it. But this is a story that, from a format standpoint, like we wanted 25-minute episodes, and we wanted them to be like super snappy. So to do that, I mean, it's okay to help it along a little bit. Yeah. And I think, especially by the time you get to episode 2, where John did this great, like, eloquent voice, it felt sing-songy, and like, you know, you were like immersed in the way that he's sort of telling this story, and it's heartbreaking. That by the time we did that, because we cut these sequentially, shot it all together, so I didn't know what the voiceover was going to be until people started laying down the voice. It was my voice in there while we're editing it, and it's like the most annoying thing in the world. But by the time John did episode 2, it was like, oh wow, it doesn't even really matter what he's saying, just to hear his voice. Yeah. And to sort of follow along these moments felt unique and interesting. Yeah. So to answer your question, like, no, I had no idea what it was.
No, but I've never seen that before. When I saw the whole series, I was really impressed with that concept of somebody, of a different character doing each episode, and seeing the world through like a Rashomon in a little bit, from their POV, which was always a little different than somebody else's. Yeah. I thought that was brilliant. I've never seen it before, and would have never thought it would work, but I thought it worked wonderfully. Yeah,
beautifully in the show. It really enriches it in so many ways. Mm-hmm. I'm going to wrap up by also asking about the Marco said the word subconscious, which reminds me of just, there's so many moments of imagery in the show, of like everything from the red car that we see, the girls washing and all these things. There's iconography throughout the series that sort of is. I mean, I mentioned the sign-off signal on the TV. There's moments in this series that you sort of are aware of. Oh, right, that has been in the background of all of our lives for years, and it has another meaning to it. Kind of talk about the depth of that, because I think it's really a beautiful grace note.
Well, I mean, I think some of it was deep and intentional. I think other things were sort of matter of fact. Like, there's a diner that comes in with like a Native American, you know, head on it. And I think a lot of these things, unfortunately, just still exist today and are found culture. And I think that was when, you know, the deep dive of sort of creating this, shooting it, became more immediate and sort of terrifying. That a lot of the stuff that we live in New York, or we live on the coast, and you think these things are not permeating our culture still, but they just are. So I think as you know, as sly as I feel like you can answer that and say, well, you know, I thought of all these things and it was really intentional. It just was easy. I mean, it's just really easy to think oppression is still permeating our culture in a big way.
And speaking of oppression, I mean, it was a blast working with Aram, but this character was really difficult to embody and to do the things we did. We were all a little horrified sometimes of the things that we were acting out. Like kidnapping that girl and having her in the car and the screaming, it still stays in my head. And when I hear it, I feel like it gives me like PTSD. And we had to live with that and do it. And you didn't want to do it again because the girl was giving it, you know, her all. And it was just, there were horrible moments that you have to act out and then try to forget if you can.
I mean, I found you wandering naked in the middle of the street. It was like
that's horrific enough. Ambient. Don't do ambient when you're acting.
John, come back to me. We need you tomorrow at 7 a.m.
I'm not coming back.
And you said la 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 la.
Great acting to be right. No ambient. right. It's your scene. I'm going to wrap up by asking each of you what you hope audiences take away from the show, from the series. And Marco, we can start with you and kind of work on down. What do you think?
So, and I'm not just saying this, but when I first saw the first 2 episodes, I've never seen a show like this, ever. And I just really hope that everyone who gets a chance to see it just, is ready for the ride, because it's a pretty wild journey.
Yeah.
First of all, it is so hard to make a show. It is really hard to make a show like this. I just really appreciate you guys coming out and supporting this, because, truly, thank you. It's been like an insanely long journey, and I think for me, John's my favorite actor in the world. I've believed in him forever. I mean, he is.
This guy too.
And I have to say, I know we're wrapping up, but when we were doing Latin History for Morons, he taught me the diligence of like what work ethic means. I mean, he did 300 shows on the road before he even took it to Broadway. He was rewriting every day, and that taught me that with diligence you can tell any story you want, I think. And so I just hope people watch it. I don't know what people will take away, but humbly, I really just think that it's your best performance that I've ever seen, and just being able to give you the chance to do that is the most amazing thing to me.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's hard to. Yeah. Well, thank you, buddy.
No, you don't have to say anything. No,
I gotta say
done.
something.
No, I don't.
I mean, but yeah, no. I mean, what a great opportunity that Aram gave me to have a lead role as complex as this, because I don't really get a chance sometimes to get roles that are this subtle and this complex. So it was incredible to have an ally like him, and I feel like my last good performance like that was with Spike Lee, who was also an ally when we did Summer of Sam, and I feel like this is my next opportunity like that. Yeah. So I want to thank. I mean, what I want you to walk away with is that we need more stories of people of color. Even if it's written by a white guy, it's all good. It's all good, but we just need these stories. We need to see these faces. We need to see these emotions and experience these experiences, and not let them disappear, not let them be erased.
Yeah. Well, the show is so rich and emotional and so terrific in so many ways. I just want to remind everybody that it is on the network on April 30th. The first 2 episodes that you just saw are going to be streaming on the network. They drop. And then it's 8 episodes. There's 2 each week after that. Trust me, you want to catch it all the way to the end. It's phenomenal. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, for John Leguizamo, Aram Rappaport, and Marco Torriani.
Thank you, everybody.
The show is The Green Veil on the network. Thank you.